You would never know it by these sounds of pure hatred, but she's actually my soulmate. Hello, friends and enemies. Welcome to Horror and Inconvenience, where things are usually spooky and always weird. Today, I'm not doing my very, very late winter reading wrap-up or any of the other several projects I have been procrastinating on. I am doing a tag video because that was what I wanted to do today. Luckily for me, Olly at Criminally does a tag video every week, so when I get in the mood to do one, I can pretty much just browse through his channel for ideas, and I found this recent tag that I found delightful, so I will be doing it. It's called the Loomis tag, and it originates from It Came From the Page. And the tag originator wanted to do something to celebrate the various cats in his life. And so it's got several prompts related to the creator's cats, and then there's a prompt at the end to add your own cat. Olly added his, and I'll be doing that prompt because I think it's cute. And then I'll be doing a prompt for one of my cats at the end. First prompt is for a cat named Loomis, and it is the most chaotic book you've ever read. So this is a book that I read when I was a teenager. It came out at the time. It's a standalone YA fantasy, and it's called The Order of the Oddfish by James Kennedy. I only read this book once. I no longer own it. More on that later. But I just remember being absolutely swept away by the creative absurdity of it. It's, if I recall correctly, more or less a Portal fantasy story, but don't quote me on this. This was a long time ago that I read it, and I haven't had the chance to reread it. I'm gonna have to order a new copy, because I think it's time to revisit it. But it had a delightfully varied cast of characters, and it had some of the absurdity of something like A Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and it was packed full of fantastical, humorous elements. Think Jasper Ford's Thursday Next series, which incidentally is an honorable mention for this question. Just a delightful book, highly recommended. Second tag is for a cat named Nami. The luckiest book you've ever found. This actually, I'm going to go with a book that I didn't end up enjoying all that much, but finding it was a great piece of serendipity for me. And that's John Saul's The Presents. While Saul was really, really popular in his day, most of his books are out of print now. And so while his most popular books, think like Black Lightning, for instance, you can find at almost any used bookstore, some of his lesser works are a little more difficult to come across. When I was gearing up for my trip to Hawaii, I was reading a bunch of books by Hawaiian writers, but I thought it would be fun to throw in an American horror novel that was set in Hawaii because I had never read John Saul before, and he has a book called The Presents that's kind of an environmental horror set on the islands. So I was having trouble finding it, and one day I went into Goodwill for completely unrelated reasons and skimmed the used books there, as I always do. Stumbled across a copy of it for $1 about 3 weeks before my trip. So that was perfect timing, and even though I didn't end up loving the book, the vibes were a lot more Michael Crichton than they were horror, and while I did like him when I was like 12, it's really not my jam anymore. It was delightful to find such an affordable copy at exactly the right moment. This is Hen's. I didn't end up adding a prompt for him because he cannot read. But he wants to be involved anyway because he's a good boy. Third prompt is for... Yes, hello. He'll be joining us for this. The third prompt is for a cat named Wisteria, and it's the book that is best to snuggle up with. Just like you, buddy. So for this prompt, I chose The Tea Dragon Society by Kay O'Neill. I don't have a Tea Dragon Society book to show you right now because they're in use. But I do have a tea dragon. These little guys are cat-sized dragons that grow magical tea leaves out of their heads. The tea leaves can do things like help you revisit old memories and heal from trauma. It's an adorable, cozy comic book series with beautiful, soft-colored, soft-lined artwork. They're written for children, older children, usually. So the characters are preteens. They're all queer. And there's a very diverse group of gentle, queer adults to guide them through their soft, magical adventures. It's really the most comforting thing I've ever come across. If you hear dogs barking, it's because they're jealous. And if you hear snuffling, it's because Hens is a Persian cat, and he's a rescue, and the breeder must have inbred several generations to create this flat face, and he cannot breathe. We feel very bad for him. Adopt, don't shop, folks. Okay, next prompt is Claude, the book that has the best adventure. Well, this one's a tie for me. I adored classic adventure novels when I was a little kid, and my two favorites are both very exciting adventures, and that's Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson and Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne. Yes, these are both extremely problematic stories, I recognize that, but Phileas Fogg was my best friend. I didn't know I was gay at the time, and I didn't know he was gay at the time, but now I understand why I'm like this. Treasure Island is just, to my mind, the perfect apotheosis of the adventure story. With its race against the clock, its betrayal, its simple but deep relationships, and, I mean, treasure hunting. It's got treasure hunting and pirates, okay? Pirates and treasure hunting, right, cats? He agrees. He can't read. He just agrees with everything, ever. Okay. Next prompt, Jughead. And that is a book you love but no longer own. The Order of the Oddfish is definitely an honorable mention for this one because right after I read it, when I was about 16, I lent my copy to a close friend who never read it or returned it, and who then lost it in the process of moving to college and all of that. So, no hard feelings, Annie. But the book I first thought of when I saw this prompt was All-American Girl by Meg Cabot. Meg Cabot is the author of The Princess Diaries, among many other sort of realistic coming-of-age rom-coms for both teens and, less often, adults. She also wrote some unfortunate supernatural romance books that I didn't care for. She was kind of ahead of the curve on that trend in a bad way. But I read all of 14 Princess Diaries books growing up, and several of her standalones as well. All-American Girl is about a kind of average punk teenager who accidentally saves the life of the president's son and subsequently has a kind of rivals to lovers. It's not enemies or anything, but a kind of rivals to lovers arc with him. The relationship is very well developed. It's a fun, goofy concept. Like, what if my date with the president's daughter had actually been good? Is more or less the concept. And, and it also, I was about 13 or 14 when I read it, and I always really appreciated the way Meg Cabot deals with the topic of sex in her books, because she's very frank and straightforward about it. She talks about things like consent and sexual health with absolutely no shame, while still relatably portraying these young female characters' sort of fraught relationship with the concept of sex, given that they grew up in American society. It's it's not great for people who grow up as girls over here. Um, yeah, and you know, all of her characters are middle class white girls, so your mileage may absolutely vary on this. But for me, being able to safely explore these topics through her books definitely protected me from some of the more toxic attitudes I could have picked up out in the world. And I will always be grateful to her for that, even though, looking back, the heteronormativity of her books makes them almost unreadable for me now. I still wish that I still owned All American Girl because it was really important to me growing up. But it would have to be my copy. And my copy no longer exists. Okay, this was Olly's prompt for his cat Venus. Name the most optimistic book you've ever read. With apologies to Olly, I am going to name a book that is optimistic derogatory, which is Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. Did I enjoy this book? Yes. Did it make me laugh? Yes. Was it a page turner I devoured in a few days, despite its bloated length? Absolutely. But it's about the President of the United States' son falling in love with a Prince Harry analog, essentially, an English prince. And the kind of fallout from their being forcibly outed and how their relationship develops in the and out of the public eye. Very compelling premise, but this book seems to exist in a kind of alternate world where the American political system is good, actually, and right can prevail, and Democrats are really progressive, and also progressiveness is all it takes to fix problems. The prince in this story has a mother who's a kind of Diana analog, except she comes from a lower class than Diana did, because people misunderstand Diana Spencer as having been a lot less rich than she was. But essentially, it's an alternate universe where the Charles character died and the Diana character lived. And so she's in it, and she's kind of accepting of her son and defends him against the queen, who's implied not to approve, but is forced by her social position to eventually concede that it's okay for her grandson to be gay. This would never happen. The fact that even though her son gets outed right before her re-election bid, the other main character's mother, the female president of the United States, still gets reelected. Unlikely. Also, there's been no female president of the United States because American misogyny is special. So that kind of took me out of the book a little bit. I don't think the world building of this America AU was really strong enough to make me buy this, but, you know, it was still a fun read. Finally, my own prompt is for, again, not hens, the most illiterate creature who's ever drawn breath with difficulty. But my other cat, Thomasina, who is my soulmate and also just a terrible person. I'm the only other creature that she tolerates. Anyone else she hisses at or bites if they come near her. Even hens, who can't see more than like an inch in front of his face and is usually entirely unaware of her presence, as well as being the least threatening creature ever to exist. She hates him. So, my prompt for Thomasina is name a difficult book that you love unconditionally. And for me, that's definitely The Life and Opinions of Tristram Shandy, Gentleman by Laurence Sterne. I'm going to put this down now so I can pet him. So, I first picked up Tristram Shandy when I was maybe 18, and purely because my mom said it was the most difficult book she ever attempted to read for her English degree and had a reputation for being impossible to finish due to its nonsensical storyline and nonlinear narrative. It has no plot. So, of course, I had to take that challenge, and I actually found myself really loving it. The first time I read it, I foolishly read an edition with basically no footnotes. I wouldn't recommend that. I'm pretty good with early modern English, and even I barely understood what was going on. But I understood enough to find it funny and charming. When I reread it later with more knowledge of early modern English, of the society of 18th century England, and importantly, with footnotes, I found I enjoyed it even more. Tristram Shandy is a book that was loved by the modernists because of its the way it breaks down narrative and the way that its humor is found in, well, partially in social relations, but also partially in the instability and absurdity of language itself. It's a very funny book, both a comedy of manners and an absurdist comedy that challenges the very philosophical foundations that you assume going into an activity such as reading a book. It is a book that makes a certain effort to be inherently difficult to read, but it was very popular in its time, and it still has a small but dedicated following of fans today. I'm one of those fans. Like Thomasina, this book gave me a strong barrier to entry, but won my heart. Thanks for tuning in. I have my very late winter reading wrap-up and several bigger project videos on their way. So I hope you guys will stick around. I've been gaining a couple extra followers lately, thanks to a very kind shout-out Olly gave me on his channel. Welcome, guys. Thank you for being here, and please stick with me. Things have been a little slow lately, but they're going to pick up soon, and I really appreciate everyone who's watching.